going to articulate your faith differently if you're responding to Jews than if you are responding to worshipers of Isis or of Zarathustra or
Zoroaster.
Yeah. So big differences that come about there. Then you got a blank page, but then you also have persecution and martyrdom. Can't overlook. This is probably the most significant force at work in the diversity of early Christian expression. When you're being persecuted, it's hard to talk to the guys next door. When you're being martyred, you generally don't want to stick up your head because it's liable to get chopped off. Persecution and martyrdom not only takes very, very zealous Christians and makes them dead, it makes average, ordinary Christians less willing to go broadcasting to sister churches here and there and everywhere that they exist. And so diversity just becomes the kind of rule of the day. Different communities living out their faith best they know how in their own local culture without an easy way of talking to other Christian communities. So you got an irreducible diversity in clergy, canon, cults, and creed because of it. Well, all that changes with the conversion of Constantine at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. How much we were talking about this a little bit last night. How much do you know about this story? You got the in hoc signo, right? In this sign concert. The legend is this: that we pretty well know that Christianity is becoming really, really successful for lots and lots of reasons. The guy that does the lion's share of really good work on this as a kind of sociologist that writes on theology is an author by the name of Rodney Stark. Stark just says, how does Christianity go from being 12 dudes following another dude to a religion that's really able to claim enough significance that it was either advantageous for Constantine to convert, or that when Constantine converted, it was socially credible to make this kind of the religion of the empire under Theodosius. Stark says, sociologically, that this happened in lots of ways, and he says, look at Mormonism, our nearest example of a faith that comes from sort of obscure, humble beginnings and is obtuse and weird, but becomes very, very, very successful and grows very, very quickly. And he says there's something about just being on a war footing, a mission footing, as opposed to being in maintenance mode. My wife and I we got these Mormon kids that go on mission. They're college age, and they come to Crittenden County. Crittenden County is this notoriously poor county with a real education gap, and so they plunk these Mormon kids down, and they're on mission. They get up in the morning. They live in a crappy one-bedroom apartment, and they go out and do mission work all day. That's their job. And they help people with their groceries. They clean floors. They clean bathrooms. They make appointments and sit down and talk to people about Mormonism. And they make converts because they're able to articulate their faith and because they're working harder and faster than anybody else in the religious marketplace. And what do you know? They have success. They're on a mission footing. And they're darling guys. They're really nice. They're lovely. And, we said, we'll be friends with you. There's no chance in hell that you're going to be converts of us. But we're going to show you hospitality, and we're going to show you that we'd be on mission footing too.
And that I worked with that was Mormon.
Yeah.
So the next time Mormon kids came around knocking on the door, I had the exact same conversation. Come in. It's 95 degrees outside. Get some air conditioning. You want some water. I know I'm not converting. I'm Catholic. It's not going to happen. But cool off and good luck to you.
Yeah. But, being on a war footing, being enthusiastic about your faith, making that your reason for existing, has a wonderful effect. And Stark says that it had a wonderful effect in Christianity. One of his great images is he said, you never want to underestimate what happens with plagues and cities. He said when before the age of antibiotics, when a plague came to a city, it was disastrous because people don't have a bit of square space between them, so the spread of disease happened really, really fast. And everybody that was rich got the hell out of Dodge fast and went to their country villas until the plague went away, because the people died out and their bodies were burned. The people that were poorest and weakest and most vulnerable, of course, had to stick around. And Stark says, what do you know? Christians deliberately stuck and didn't leave, even if they had the chance to. And they made a work of discipleship in serving people that were sick and feeding the widows and orphans and being nice when nobody else was nice because they were under threat of dying. And you think of a sort of Mother Teresa kind of figure. The whole, Mother Teresa is extraordinarily rare among Christians. But can you imagine a community of Mother Teresas in a plague-ridden city, witnessing to the faith of the gospel, burying the dead, feeding and clothing, tending to the sick? At some point, people are going to be won over to that kind of love and grace and mercy. And because of that, the church grew. Well, eventually the church becomes big enough in the Roman Empire that regardless of what you think of the sincerity of Constantine's conversion, and there are reasons to think he may have been a sincere Christian, some reasons to think maybe not so much. But at some point, Christianity was just big enough that it made sense. So the story goes that there was a battle for succession for the emperor, and the battle was fought at the Milvian Bridge. And prior to the battle, Constantine had a vision that saw the Cairo in the sky, or a cross in the sky, and heard, in hoc signo, in this sign, conquer. And then he put the Cairo, the monogram of Jesus or the cross on all the shields, and won this dramatic victory at Milvian Bridge and became emperor. And he repaid the kindness of Jesus, or was involved in just normal realpolitik by granting religious toleration. So you have Christianity going from the worst persecution under Diocletian, the previous emperor, to being tolerated. And then under Theodosius, the very next emperor, being the religion of the empire. So, the dramatic turnabout, in fortunes for the early Christian movement happened very quickly. Well, what happened to our four diverse areas? This is the Gutenberg Bible in Latin. They're produced at Mainz in Germany. That's a manuscript of P46. If you have any Greek experience, if you go to a Greek New Testament, P46 is one of the big old witnesses to the New Testament that we use to create the Greek Bible that becomes what we translate into English or Latin or whatever. The original source. We think that that's about as close as we get to the actual codex, the actual document that St. Paul authored. So, and then this is a collection of Bibles at the local Christian bookstore. So how do we get from that to this is a long story. The word canon, canon in Greek, comes from this Greek word meaning measuring rod or rule. So when you're putting this together in a paper, don't write C-A-N-N-O-N. It's not a gun that we shoot at people. It's not a howitzer. It's a measuring rod. Canon with a one N. It refers to the official list or collection of the sacred books in the Christian church. This one right here happens to be my book of the Gospels on the altar at Trinity in the Fields, and my favorite crucifix for the altar. So there you go. For both Jews and Christians, the final authority for faith and practice is God. But the later stages of the Old Testament Judaism, a belief arose that God's mighty deeds had been committed to written scriptures. Scripture was probably not always recognized as such as it was being written down. In other words, St. Paul didn't sit down and go, hey, I'm going to get up today and after my coffee, I'm going to write the Bible. and probably wasn't, as he was penning his letter to the Romans, saying, it's a hell of a nice Bible I'm writing, or whatever. There was probably a de facto canon before a de jure canon. And the idea is...
How did those letters survive?
Well,
can you make a copy of them and keep them? Or, what... The fact that he... Anyway.
Well, this is the de jure part of it. People are writing... the apostles were authoritative figures. These are our living connections to the Jesus we worship. You knew Jesus. Wow, anything that you've got to say probably is pretty important.
I'm thinking about that apophatic. What
Yeah.
about the letters that don't exist anymore?
Yeah.
Golly, just imagine.
Yeah. So you got to do a little brain game that I do sometimes with undergrads. What happens if you go into a cave tomorrow and find 3rd Corinthians or 4th John, some other text written by a church. What do you do with that? But basically, the idea is that people are recognizing that these are not, and this is part of the sensus fidei. That people are recognizing that this is not just advice. It's not just pastorally. That people are reading this stuff and they are drawn to these things as being written by people who have seen the resurrected Jesus. And because of that, they save them. And they copy them. And they share those writings with other communities. Many of the letters started as encyclicals. It's probably a good bet that a lot of the letters that are written, there are ones that we just know were circular. Revelation was written to a constellation of churches in Asia Minor. The book of Hebrews was written to circulate widely to a number of different communities. Rome was probably written to the church at Rome. 1 Corinthians was written to the church at Corinth. But quickly these were treated like encyclicals too. They were copied and shared. So that what you have are, early Christian communities getting together for worship. And in addition to sharing sometimes written, perhaps unwritten stories about Jesus, they're writing or reading from sections of these sacred letters that they've hung on to. They're reading. You sort of imagine, a church today that doesn't have anything but, a book written by Billy Graham, a Gideon's New Testament, and a 1940 Episcopal hymnal, and that's the only stuff that they have. Well, this stuff is going to find a way into its worship life, right? It's access to the story of Jesus that we're worshiping. It's a way of growing and developing in our discipleship. Now, say that community bumps into another community, and they say, what are you reading on Sunday mornings? Oh, well, we're reading this. Oh, we don't have that. And so you have this exchange, and, the Canon start